I'm Jonathan Gerwitz, Vice President of KGB Texas Communications, and today on The Point, we're visiting with Jeff Arndt, President and CEO of Via Metropolitan Transit. Morning, Jeff.
Good morning, and welcome to Central Plaza.
So this is a really interesting time for public transit in San Antonio. There's public discussion, there's political interest in doing things and in moving people in ways that we've never done before.
Absolutely. We have a board that's really revved up behind a plan. We have the mayor, we have the judge, we have state representatives, we have TxDOT, all the people at the table looking at ways to move it forward.
And let's talk about the public process. I know you've had a number of public meetings and rounds of public meetings. Tell us about the public involvement.
There's been extensive public involvement, probably dating back 2.5 or 3 years from the very beginning when we were putting our 2040 plan together in concert with the city's SA Tomorrow plan. So we've had rounds of public meetings about what would you like to see in a transit system, where should the improvements be made, and so the 2040 plan that we have right now is a reflection of all those comments.
I think that's an important point because this is really a community-driven process. This is listening to what people who use public transit, who might use public transit if they had different alternatives, what they want.
Correctly. What would be attractive to you? What would make you consider taking public transportation even if you had a vehicle available to you?
So first step in that process is that last year City Council voted to give Via some additional money to improve some of your most used routes. How was that money used and what was the impact?
Well, so first of all, Councilman Saldana was really the champion of that effort because he found that as a result of his spending a full month taking the bus, that frequency was the big issue. The lack of frequency, rather, was the big issue, and that our funding was what prevented us from being able to provide that kind of frequency. So he worked through with council, and ultimately council agreed and voted to send us what will be $10 million annually to improve frequency on a series of bus routes. Here's what happened, though. We're implementing it in 3 phases. After only the first phase was implemented, we compared the ridership on those routes to the rest of the system, and we looked both before and after. Well, before, they all looked pretty similar results. After, though, what we found was the system as a whole had a drop of about 8% in ridership, and these routes had an increase of between 4 and 5%. That's about a 13-point gap, and we've seen that gap has gotten larger over the last several months. Personally, I was surprised it was that fast, that we got that quick a response, but we're pushing routes toward 10 to 12-minute frequency, which is what I call the sweet spot, where you don't worry about a schedule anymore, you just go out and wait for the bus.
Let's talk about rapid transit. What is rapid transit?
Okay, so rapid transit is any form of transit where you have an exclusive right-of-way or running way for your transit vehicles. So the whole point of that is to increase your ability to get around traffic so you have better speed. Typically, rapid transit is going to have station areas that are a little bit more widely spaced, so that helps contribute to speed. Rapid transit is always high frequency, by definition high frequency. So it's a combination of those things which make transit services attractive.
So rapid transit, you're going to use a dedicated lane, but if you're taking a lane away, how is that helping with congestion?
So I'm going to preface my response with the fact that you don't always have to take a lane away. There are sections of rights-of-way of streets where like a two-way left turn lane ends up being converted into a piece of a BRT, a bus rapid transit or a rapid transit lane. So you don't always have to do that. And the second thing is, in areas where you have real constraints in right-of-way and where it's really not feasible from a traffic perspective to take a lane, the federal government will still contribute to your project as long as 50% of that project is in dedicated right-of-way. So there's a lot of flexibility that we have with rapid transit along those lines. That stated, my perspective is that in nearly every other resource we have that's community-based, water, solid waste, we look at ways and how can we stretch those resources more? How can we conserve water? How can we increase recycling? The roadway system, we really haven't focused that much on how can we increase the number of people we can carry in a roadway system. we are at a point with a million people headed this way, and the inability of the current system to handle those people, and frankly, the inability of simple expansion of the current system to probably carry those people, where we have to start thinking in terms of how can we move more people in a limited right-of-way.
Technology is playing an increasing role in the transportation discussion these days, from autonomous vehicles to ride sharing. So what role will technology play in the future of via metropolitan transit?
Well, the third leg of our plan is smart transit. So first of all, a lot of technology is going to be applied to the transit vehicles themselves, including the possibility of automated transit, if you will, on not driverless buses. But the other thing is, in transit, we often deal with the fact that we have a station, we have a location, and people need to get a mile away from that station. And so we can see the opportunity to have autonomous vehicles, for example, create shuttles. The other thing is autonomous vehicles are actually going to add to the load on the street, because once you get out of your autonomous vehicle and it goes to pick up someone else, it's going to be traveling empty. So for the first time, we'll have 0 passenger cars taking capacity of that roadway. And so that makes it even more important, as that mix comes forward, more important that we look at finding ways to increase the person carrying capacity of that corridor.
VIA is running a pilot program in the northeast part of San Antonio, testing out new technologies
Correct.
for that final leg of transportation. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So we hope to have that on the street by the end of this year or early next year. But the idea is that in a suburban environment, that running traditional fixed route system doesn't necessarily work well with the layout. And so what we would do is take the resources that we have in fixed route and take them out and replace them with a series of vehicles that would essentially rove within that area. If you live in that area, you would reserve the vehicle, you could travel anywhere within that geographic boundary, and then with respect to first last mile, we'll tie you into specific locations where you can get onto the bus and complete your trip.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for joining us on The Point.